You can, like, yeah, I'm just trying to really ask them for it. Staff always come, but I'm telling you guys, you'll be able to go for it. I'm not class. Pretty ready to go. It'll be on the you see Wes? You should be here. You should be here.
He's out putting outside. He has to be solid.
He doesn't.
Someone just got a sign. I told him one. Falls Church. Yeah, I'm like, yeah. Between you and Richard, it's like, yeah, two wise guys finished up. Might be breaking it. Don't even have to come back. I go do locker room here. That's my every morning. I drop my kids off or go to Harvard. And I don't mess with them. It's going to be just that. It's got your trailer. It's right now. This is their cars.
Everybody's microphones are off by default, I think. Brett. There you go. I just happened to notice. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the regularly scheduled council meeting of the Apex Town Council for October 15th, 2019. Pointing out that we have one member out tonight, but we do have a quorum. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and at this time, as far as invocation goes, I'd like to ask everyone to remember that we're here to serve the people of Apex, that we seek wisdom from powers that give us the ability to live and think and be here on this earth, that we come here together because we live here, we are a community, and we value each other's opinion, and we will conduct ourselves in a way that reflects that. Please bow your heads in a moment of silence with me. Thank you. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. As we look at the agenda, I want to point out a couple of things. If you got an agenda, it looks like this. They were on the podium as I walked by. It looked like we were out. So if you don't have one, but you want one, feel free to kind of scoot around and find somebody that's got one, see if they'll share. I'm certain that they will be happy to. Also on the presentations, I've had conversation with the would-be recipient, and we're going to do that in a couple of weeks at the next meeting. So we're not going to do that one tonight. But it's not through controversy. It's just based on availability of the recipient, and we want to modify some of the wording just a little bit. So we will move past the presentations tonight and go into consent agenda. Consent agenda are the items that are typically voted on in a single motion and are generally considered non-controversial. However, if any council member wishes to pull one for later discussion in the meeting, they certainly may do so. It's my understanding from the town manager that consent number 7 has been requested to be discussed later. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if there's no objection from the council, we'll just move consent 7 as new business number 1. Okay.
The town manager is requesting that.
I didn't ask where it came from.
Yes.
Okay, staff requested it. Thank you. Also, it is my observation from the printed agenda that public hearing number 3, the applicant has requested a continuance. So instead of having a normal, assuming that we need to declare that sooner rather than later, I'd like to recommend that we move public hearing 3 after public hearing number 1, which has been requested for removal, as I understand. So moving public hearing 3 above number 2, but not above number 1. And I believe that's all the changes that I've been informed about. Are there any others that anybody would like to suggest? If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda as discussed?
Adopt the consent agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. I got sidetracked on moving consent number 7, didn't I? Thank you. Let's. So let me ask: is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with number 7 removed?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor of approving the consent agenda items 1 through 6, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. All right, that passes unanimously. So now I'll go back to what I was doing before, which was setting the agenda. Since I've already discussed them, I won't do it again. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as discussed?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All right. discussion on the motion to approve as amended? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, the motion is approved and the agenda is set for the night. This takes us to the public forum. This is an opportunity for you to speak to your council. The clerk is picking up the sign-up sheets now. And as you ponder any public discussion tonight, I'll remind you that if you put your name on a sheet, you should have also picked up one of these from outside. This is the guidelines for public speaking. So if you did, you need to be familiar with those. In the public forum, I see we have 7 names listed. And just a quick review. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And before I jump straight into it, the town clerk mentioned to me just before the meeting that some of you were going to speak on the same topic. If you know who you are, can you raise your hand? Okay, and do you all intend to speak individually, or did you want to have a representative speak and get a longer period of time?
We would prefer to speak individually.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. That should be fine. All right, with that, we will begin. And as I'll remind everybody, there's a 3-minute timer. There's a clock up here with a green, yellow, and red light. So you'll see that when you come up to speak. Please respect that so that we can move rapidly through our meeting tonight. We don't want to minimize your words to us, but we've found that almost every point can be made succinctly in about 2 minutes. So the 3rd minute is just to let you finish. With that said, the first people, Peter Kaplan, then that will be followed by Sid Basu and Shin Shu. So Peter Kaplan, please start by stating your name and address for the record.
Peter Kaplan, 2524 Walden Woods Drive.
All right, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. While I'm here as part of the contingent speaking out against the rezoning of Morris Acres, what I want to discuss right now transcends this one rezoning. Mayor, council members, I know we can all agree that we want Apex to remain a great place to live, put down roots, and raise a family. I'm confident we all agree that our beloved town of Apex has seen explosive growth over the past several years, and at times infrastructure has had a hard time keeping up. I'm sure that you agree that growth needs to be controlled. We want Apex's growth to be like an oak tree, tall and strong, providing shade and comfort for all those who call it home. We don't want out-of-control growth like a cancerous tumor sucking the life from everything around it. Just recently, the town did an exceptional job of putting together a plan for managing growth going forward. I am, of course, referring to the Apex 2045 plan. While that plan may not be perfect, it is and should be our touchstone for controlled growth. I could fill a stadium with residents who want less growth. Conversely, I don't think I could fill a bathtub with citizens who want even higher zoning densities. The 2045 plan already has massive growth built into it. Can we agree we don't need more? The problem that I see, having been involved in this recent rezoning issue, is that there are many unelected special interests, both in and out of government, who have their own agenda for the way Apex should be developed. They want higher and higher zoning densities, citizens be damned. The 2045 plan was ratified just this past February by you, our elected officials. So I know that you'll all agree that the Apex 2045 plan can and should be our guidepost for controlling the growth going forward. Additionally, the zoning densities in the 2045 plan should represent a maximum, not a minimum. I want to put an end to the ongoing pattern of ratcheting up zoning densities beyond what is on the current town plan. Therefore, I'd like to propose a simple rule change, stating that any increase in zoning densities beyond what is on the 2045 plan should require unanimous vote from the planning board and town council. Because if you are serious about controlling growth, and I know that you are, you have to be against the ratcheting up of zoning densities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Sid Basu.
Thank you, Mayor, for this opportunity. Mayor, respected council members, officials, and fellow residents.
Please, state your name and address.
This is Speed Basu at 732 Wine Point Court, Apex, off of Jenks Road. And we moved here from Morrisville, March of 2018. Want to call Apex our home, the peak of good living. We love it. Thank you for everything you do. We have very serious concerns with an issue that has just recently come to light and was really a curveball that was thrown at us. And I'd like to pull up the site that So the Wake County Public School System has initiated a reassignment of schools and through a draft proposal. And we here representing the Preserve at White Oak community are here to oppose that and share our deep anguish and concerns about this reassignment for several reasons. First off, from an individual basis, the reason my family and I moved here to Apex was because of the White Oak Elementary School. We have a rising kindergartner and a 6-week-old. And I thought that I'd be losing sleep at night feeding her and changing her diapers, but that's not the reason why we're losing sleep at night. It's because of this reassignment of the school. And what's happened is we're being asked to move from White Oak Elementary, which is a fantastic school, to Salem ES, and then the same thing's happening with the Mills Park Middle School being reassigned to Salem Middle. We have several concerns about that. The site that's been pulled up is a forum for us to share our grievances. There are about 150 responses. I would say 95% of those in that particular bracket are from our community, Preserve at White Oak. So a couple of quick things there. Why are we opposed to this? One, it's a calendar change. So White Oak is a traditional calendar. They're going to a year-round calendar at Salem ES. So that does a lot of different things to us. So first of all, I work as a business consultant. I travel quite a bit for work. My wife works in Raleigh, and that's where her office is. So we were thinking that the traditional would work great because in summer, when my clients, wherever in the world they are actually on leave or enjoying summer vacation, there isn't much travel to do, so I could probably be home more, work from my home office, and take care of that aspect of our living. So with that, that's a huge thing for us. Second, about 50% of families that are living in the Preserve at White Oak community have 2 or more kids. So this is a big toss-up for them. They're going to have one kid going to a year-round, and now they're going to a traditional. It's a real mess. The other thing I want to talk about is the crowding issue and the data that's been put forth to make this point that this is why we need to do this to you guys. When we visited the school, we had 3 tours. One before we bought into the community. Primary reason for us buying into the community was the White Oak School. And that is a reason across the board for several of our residents. I toured the school with my wife, and as recently as September 17th at 10 a.m., the data manager gave us a tour, and she said we're only at about 50% capacity.
All right, thank you, Mr. Basu.
So,
Mr. Chu?
My name is Xin Xu, and I live on 2618 Rambling Creek Road, Apex. And may I have the permission to hand out some of the papers, please?
Sure, you can hand them to the clerk and she will distribute them.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, feel free to begin.
Okay, so I'm also here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak out for our neighborhood. Our school were rezoned from the White Oak Elementary School to the Salem Elementary School, and from the Mills Park Middle School to Salem Middle School. I have 3 kids. One is in the middle school, one is in the second grade, and then one will be in the elementary kindergarten in 2 years. So this is really nightmare for me. Even when I see that, I couldn't sleep, and try to say, okay, what's the solution? Why they do this? The school calendar change affected my family tremendously. It's just because if I can't keep them scheduled same time, it's going to be disaster for me, and I probably will be running very exhausted. Number 2 is the crowding issue. If you got the paper I gave, so these are all the data that were copied from the Wake County Public School System. I chopped and then pasted there just for convenience and focusing. And the reason for the rezoning is because of the crowdedness. So the White Oak right now, there is no trailer, and the percent crowding is 96.8%. But they do give us a choice. Say, if you do want to stay in the traditional calendar, they give us the choice to move to Balcom Elementary School. However, the Balcom Elementary School, the crowdedness is 97.9%, which is a little bit higher than the White Oak Elementary School. So that is not even a possible solution for us. And without talking about other issues, the kids moving from the school to school. The number 3 is, I think the easier things, instead of moving the students, is adding a trailer to the White Oak Elementary School. That will be far less stressful to solve the issue if the White Oak is crowded. And plus, last year when we moved to the Apex, the Wake County never really say, oh, this school is going to be crowded or kept. They actually use the White Oak Elementary as an overflow school for other schools. So I don't know why this decision coming overnight. The third I want to talk about is our district also changed. We were changed from the White Oak Elementary School, which is District 8 right now, to the Salem, which is District 9. So we're losing our voting power for the school board members. And then the last I want to emphasize is on this Google map. If we were assigned to the Salem Elementary School or the Balcom, we have to cross the Highway 55, which is very busy right now, and I don't know how we're going to handle that every day with the students, and also the 64. So thank you very much for listening.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shu. Farida Unwala, how did I do?
Pretty good.
Okay.
Not great.
Not great.
Okay.
I'll work on it.
Okay.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Farida Unwala. I live at 558 White Oak Pond Road. I don't have a paper in front of me, so it's just my heart pouring out right now. I'm a mom of a high schooler who's a traditional, a middle schooler who's traditional and goes to Mills Park, and an elementary, and two actually middle schoolers who are both at Mills Park right now. And I, as a mother, represent my community. The whole traditional to year-round doesn't work for us. As you know, the high schooler is going to be in traditional. My 2 middle schoolers are going to be in year-round. And there's a greenway that's going to be developed behind our house, which will take the kids biking, walking straight to White Oak. Mills Park, my kids are going to Mills Park. We were accommodated into Mills Park. We were zoned for Mills Park. We were zoned for White Oak. Why are we taking this opportunity to take this? This is taken away from us, and I don't understand that. When planning happens, you plan it out. This housing community was planned to accommodate all the kids from our community. The planning was there. All of a sudden, when the development has stopped, we were rezoned to this new different schools. It doesn't work for us, simple. My request is to look into that. New housing developments, yes, when families move in, they have an option to choose where they want their kids to go. We chose that option when we decided to put our roots down into this community. We chose that option to a traditional. We chose that option for White Oak. We chose that option for Mills Park. To take that option away from us now, when everybody's settled, personally, I think it's not right. Since we do, as a family, as a parent, I think I do have a right to choose what is best for my kid, and I chose that. And safety is another issue that I personally think moving our kids to travel to schools on the other side of the highway, yeah, that is definitely a big concern for me. Let me look at my notes again. Oh, yes, we stayed in this area for a reason. We put down roots here for a reason. There's a whole planning that goes into it, right? When you buy a house, like you think about your families, you think about the future and everything. That's what went into it. And now to take that away, I feel hurt. And I definitely resonate the feelings of my community as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Finwala. Tara McMahon? Or Tara, Tara McMahon, all right.
Thank you.
Please start with your name and address for us.
Sorry. My name is Tara McMahon, and my address is 604 Vine Ponds Court in Apex. As you can see, I've been very emotional about this rezoning of schools because my son is going there now, and he's in first grade, and he loves his friends and his teachers. And we just bought a house last year. It's our first house that we ever bought, and we are very excited to be settling down in the wonderful town of Apex in a great school zone with schools 5 minutes down the road from us. Like our neighbors have been saying, you can cycle there. I feel like this rezoning is looking mainly at data. They're looking at potential growth of the area. They're not considering the children that have been going there for the last 2 or 3 years and that are going there right now, and the changes that they're going to have to go through and the impact on their emotional well-being as well as possible academic well-being. I'm trying to look at data myself so I can try to make sense of what's going on, and I don't understand why they have not yet capped White Oak. If it's getting overcrowded, wouldn't the option be, like they're doing to most schools in the area, to cap it? And then perhaps send the overflow students to Salem instead of ripping our community apart and making us go there when we chose to live in the preserve of White Oak and have our children go to White Oak Elementary 5 minutes down the road. I also did some research into Salem because I'm trying to make sense of all of this. I drove by Salem and I saw several new construction communities going on. There's townhouses, there's apartments, there's housing communities, but one of them has 96 houses being built. These are right down the road and all zoned for Salem Elementary and Middle School, as well as the Apex townhouses that are, I think, just down the road from here. Salem has 752 students right now and a capacity for 832. Transferring us there will make that school overcrowded, in addition to all the other new construction going on in that area. In addition to what my neighbors were saying, how we chose a traditional school zone. Most of our family are living in Ireland. So we try to go back there in the summers to spend long periods of time with our 2 young kids, to see their grandfather who's 80 years old, and we don't know how much longer we're going to be able to spend time with him, so we spend extended vacations there. And if we're on a year-round school, we're not going to be able to do that. They have said that we can apply for transfers to traditional schools if we have a year-round zone, but those schools are almost capped themselves. They're almost full, so that's not going to be an option for most of us at all. So we're just here today to try to get some support from any of you on the town council or you, Mr. Mayor, to try to help our situation and try to keep us in our school zone of White Oak and Mills Park.
All right, thank you. Nate Burnham.
Thank you. These are some tough acts to follow. Short microphone, too.
It'll pick you up just fine.
Yeah, my name's Nate
You can
Burrian.
ignore it, it'll get you.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
I live at 723 Meadowside Court. Very new development, similar to my neighbors. We did our research ahead of time looking into these school districts. We looked at Chatham County, not far from our development. This also being our first house that we bought, thinking, we can maybe get more house, get more for our standard of living, but dang, these schools are so important, and we did our research into the specific schools. We were a bit blindsided, as they've mentioned, about this rezoning. One of the biggest benefits that we've seen in our community recently that was mentioned was the Greenway. We were so excited that we would be able to, bring our kids to school on foot. Great for exercise, great for involvement with your children, and also a big safety aspect. I do believe our tax dollars are also going into funding that, which is something that I would, very greatly support and love to utilize. I think one thing that I'd like to touch on also is my experience growing up, going to school and living near my classmates and the kids that I was on sports teams with was something that really forged my friendships and ultimately put me around really good influences too, I think, growing up. The problem with the rezoning is that we would be going, a bit of a treacherous route to get to these other schools. the schools that our kids would be going to, they wouldn't be, down the street necessarily, other than the few examples that we have within our own community. We're a bit of a satellite neighborhood in these different schools. I think that poses challenges for our kids to spend times in good environments with the kids that they're going to be, that they should be going to school with the more proximal schools to us. So we're asking for your support. Please hear us out as you continue to do and reconsider this zoning, because we really want to stay here. This is the big reason why we chose this community.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. And finally, Jagrup Singh.
Good evening. My name is Jagrup Singh. Live at 711 White Oak Pond Road. And we had just moved down here last year from Connecticut. And before moving down here, we had came down here 3-4 times to see the area and the schools and all that thing. And we have spent a lot of time investing in our kids. And we finally bought a house where it's close to the school that we wanted, which was White Oak and Mills Park. And we grew up sending our kids to traditional year-round school, traditional school. And this change is coming as from a traditional to a year-round school, which is like, to us as a parent, is unacceptable. Because, we have one daughter in a year-round and 2 kids in a traditional school. That doesn't work for us. And plus, taking 3 weeks off at a time during the year, it won't work for us. And I would seriously consider you guys, if you can consider, stop the rezoning of our schools. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Singh. That concludes our public forum tonight, and just before we move on to the next item, if the council will allow me, just a couple of really quick comments. We don't normally respond directly to everything, but I feel like with the presentations tonight, which very respectful, thank you very much. A couple of quick comments. As you know, Wake County does all the assignments through the school board. The county runs the schools. The town doesn't have much say at all, other than maybe a little bit of networking influence. With that said, I do remember seeing one of our former school board members and now commissioner is here tonight, Miss Evans. I don't mean to pull you out in the middle, but she has heard, at the very least, your comments tonight. I'm sure she has contacts on the school board now, and certainly as an Apex resident, I'm sure she's familiar with your plight. I feel for you. I know school assignment can be hard. My children were reassigned in elementary school. The one thing that made it at least acceptable to me is that the school they were reassigned to was about 3/4 of a mile closer to where we live than they were originally going. So that meant that not only did my whole neighborhood go, which meant a lot of their friends went to, but it made it a little easier for us to get to their activities, which I found even as a working father, I really looked forward to the next event. And so I can feel for you, and I didn't do the math here, but if your reassignment is going to take you farther away, and I understand the calendar issue too, I can understand how that would be difficult. We don't, other than, like I said, other than networking and maybe people we have contact with, I don't know of any other real influence that we can have, but we certainly can understand what you're going through. I would like to maybe encourage you to be in touch with Lindsay Mahaffey, who is also an Apex resident and school board member. And I believe she's, I think you can find her email address at the very least on the website. And she will be able to meet with you and or at least talk with you and understand your problem. If she's very aware of it, then she may be able to give you some very clear responses. If it's new information to her, she may need to look into it. I don't know. I don't know if anybody else wanted to add anything, but hopefully that will provide, and I appreciate you coming up and letting us know. It's good for us to be informed. Thank you all.
Could I say just one thing, Mayor?
Okay.
Because Olive Chapel Elementary, when they put that in, the next thing they did was put in mobile classrooms. I don't understand. If they don't have mobile classrooms out at your elementary, I don't understand why they don't do that. It's much better. for a number of reasons. I'm kind of a global warming nut, and from a carbon footprint alone and traffic on our roads, they would be far better off for the community to put a mobile classroom or two on your school. You might suggest that to them.
All right, I like the idea of walking to school. I did that in first grade here at Bauckham when I was a first grader, and it was some very enjoyable walks to school and home. All right, we'll now move into public hearings. So as we have seen, public hearing number one in the, even though it's fully presented and was duly continued until this date, there was a note from staff that said that there was a request by the applicant. So as I normally would do, I would check to see with the planning staff to see if there is a presentation or if we are going to defer to the applicant to make a request.
We'd like to defer to the applicant.
Oh, okay. So is the representative for the applicant here that would like to make the request?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group here on behalf of the applicant in this case. Yes, subsequent to the last meeting where this matter was tabled until this meeting, my client has made what I would consider categorical changes to the nature of the request. The overall density that's proposed for the project has been reduced from 297 units to 122 units, which is a 7 dwelling units per acre overall density. They've also changed the nature of the use from multifamily to townhomes and reduced building height on the site to 45 feet across the board. The end result is that the request for a future land use map amendment goes away under that process. We'll be removing that request. Unfortunately, none of that can be presented to you all tonight because we have to go back through a neighborhood meeting process as well as to planning board and then back to you all. And so our respectful request tonight would be to give us the opportunity to go through those steps. I've been in contact with some of the folks who have been kind of leading the charge from the community outreach standpoint and have been what appears to be influential in that process. The feedback I've gotten from them has been supportive of this particular request, but obviously they're here and can speak on their own behalf. But that would be our request here tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barron. It is my understanding that based on this request, there is no need for continuance, and in addition, there's no need for public hearing or a vote. Is that considered a significant modification that will then send it back to staff, which will then send it through the planning board all over again? Is that,
So, yes, it has to go through a neighborhood meeting, it has to go to the planning board. My understanding is that you can that the board can make a motion to refer it back to the planning board. There needs to be a vote tonight to refer it back.
Thank you. So I think the request for us as council would be to refer this item back to the planning board based on the statement of the representative for the developer that says that the changes that they're proposing are so significant that they want to go back through that process. Discussion?
I feel like if there are huge changes here, then yes, it needs to be reviewed again by staff, have another neighborhood meeting so that everyone's aware of what's going on, and then back to the planning board and then to us. So.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman. Any other thoughts?
I just have maybe a question. So the process would be, it goes back to staff. I mean, the timing of it, I mean, there could be a different council at a certain point coming up, and so will this happen? Can this happen before that, or is it going to be for sure after?
Yes, they've actually already submitted a new application to staff. We have not reviewed it. We were waiting to see what you all would have to say about it. They have to hold a neighborhood meeting. There are guidelines for that. They have to send notices out 10 days prior to neighbors within 300 feet and the affected HOA contacts. They have to be, that meeting has to be held on certain nights, so it may be longer than 10 days from now when they have to hold that meeting, but it will be done before the planning board agendas are prepared. The planning board meeting in November will be on Tuesday, November 12th at 4:30 p.m. due to the Veterans Day holiday. And then it would be back here on Tuesday, November 19th for another public hearing.
Is there a motion to refer this item to the planning board?
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to refer this item to the planning board. Discussion on that? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, that passes unanimously. Just a quick comment on my part. I think the big thing here is there's no longer a request, based on what you said, to modify the land use map. That's very big. That's a big line in the sand that is now not being crossed. So I think this is worth going back through the neighborhood meeting. I hope that everybody who has some input can attend and be productive in that conversation, so that we can move forward with progress. That's done. Thank you, Mr. Barron, for bringing that up. Any final thought on your part?
No, other than to say that in addition to the traditional notices that we'll send out for the neighborhood meeting, I've also been in contact with a few folks, and I'll let them know as soon as we have plans finalized, but it's currently looking like October 30th would be the date for that neighborhood meeting. So just for the benefit of the folks who are here, to be on the lookout and pencil that date if they want to participate in that neighborhood meeting.
Thank you. That's good to know. All right, thank you. Now, in keeping with our agenda, we'll move to public hearing number 3, which has been requested for a continuance until November 6th. This is the Horton Park PUD.
Take a small break.
It's a little, it's too early for that, but feel free to escape. I'm sorry, but it's just too early. We can, you can go while they're going. Sorry. Just pausing until we can get the doors closed. All right. So we're now on public hearing number 3. In case you weren't paying attention, public hearing number 2 hasn't been heard yet. We're just looking to consider the request from the applicant to continue this item until the 6th of November. Is the applicant here to make the request personally, or a representative for the applicant? Okay. I never want to assume that what's here is what.
Yes.
You may have changed your mind in the last 5
No, sir. No, sir. I have not. I told the neighbors the same thing. We are asking, and we did it proactively. It's just too tight. It's 24 hours between the planning board. I'm sorry, Jeff Roach, Peak Engineering and Design, representing the developer of the property.
All right.
We did it proactively. It's too tight with the planning board last night, town council this evening. We didn't know what was going to come out of planning board last night, so we are asking the recommendation of for council to delay it to the next meeting.
Okay. So just to be clear, this is about a month from now. Oh wait, no, it's the next
No, it's the
regularly
next
scheduled meeting.
Correct. Next
First
regular.
one in November.
That's
Sorry,
correct.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Just feels like it, I guess, with
It's
what?
early in the month.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
this meeting is much earlier than normal. So.
Yeah, it is 3 weeks or so.
So yes,
Okay.
we are asking just for that continuance,
Okay.
just to give us
All
time to work through the issues that
All right,
we did.
before you walk away, let me see if any council members have any questions for you on that request. Okay, not hearing any. I will see if there's a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion for continuance? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, that passes unanimously. Now that takes us to public hearing number 2. So just to be clear, before we leave, November 6th is the date certain for the continuance. All right, and presenting public hearing number 2 tonight is Ms. Mayo from the Planning Department.
Good evening. The first full public hearing before you tonight, anyway, is for rezoning case 19CZ15. This is on Mount Zion Church Road. It's the Mount Zion Church PUD. Just to give you an idea of where it is, it's kind of located here on the southwestern side of the town's jurisdiction is what I'm in. It is here just north of the intersection of Mount Zion Church Road and Richardson Road here. Just to give you an idea, this is the Parkside neighborhood, Buckhorn Preserve, Mackenzie Ridge, and a little piece of the Friendship Station PUD down here. The applicant is proposing a rezoning for the 11.3 acres shown here. The parcel is currently mostly wooded, as you can see, with some small cleared areas. There's also a stream that goes through here and a few small wetland areas. The project is, the parcels are currently zoned rural residential. The surrounding properties are primarily rural residential to the north, south, and west. In the general vicinity, however, we have several projects that are also zoned PUD-CZ and a few properties just across the street that are zoned medium-density conditional zoning. Generally speaking, the uses on these properties are either single-family or vacant. However, the Mount Zion Church is actually located here across the street. The applicant's proposing rezoning to planned unit development conditional zoning, and the 2045 land use map designates this as medium-density residential. Because the PUD actually proposes a maximum density of 4.1 dwelling units per acre, this is consistent with the 2045 land use map. That medium-density residential designation is between 3 and 7 dwelling units per acre, so 4.1 is nicely in the middle there. The proposed rezoning is then valid and compliant with the 2045 land use map. The applicant has proposed a few uses for you. They are accessory apartment, single family, utility minor, recreation facility private, greenway, park active, and park passive. The applicants also proposed several architectural conditions. Most of them are consistent with what you generally see for architectural conditions for single family, so I'm only going to highlight the ones that are different in some way. Number 2 is all single family homes shall have a crawl space or raised foundation, which at minimum rises at least 20 inches from average grade across the front of the house to the finished floor level at the front door. That part of it is very standard. That's what you would normally see in our zoning conditions. Second part of it here, though, is unless they provide a first floor master bedroom, zero entry homes without the 20-inch rise are permitted if they provide the first floor master bedroom. Lots permitted as zero entry shall be noted on the final plat.
How many will that be allowed? I missed that. All of them that way then?
There is no maximum listed. Number 5 on your staff report is the garage cannot protrude more than 6 feet from the front facade or front porch. Typically, that would say 1 foot. They've added the additional caveat that any homes where the front entry garage protrudes more than 1 foot from the front facade or front porch shall also provide one of the following additional decorative elements. And that list of decorative elements is in your staff report. Those are very consistent with what we see in other conditions. If we skip down to number 10, no more than 25% of the lots may be accessed with J drives. There shall be no more than 3 such homes in a row on any single block, and any lots eligible for a J drive home shall be identified in the final plat. And then 11, all single-family detached residential homes shall be pre-configured with conduit for a solar energy system. The applicants also proposed a number of design controls. I'll highlight a few of those. One of those is the maximum density, which is 4.1 units an acre. That's a maximum of 46 single-family lots. The minimum lot size is 4,000 square feet. The maximum building height is 45 feet. And then the project complies with the UDO's 25% RCA requirement. This project was also submitted before the UDO amendment, where the UDO was amended to change the mask rating penalty from 2% RCA to 5% RCA. As such, they could have proposed just the 2% RCA. Instead, they've decided to go ahead with the current UDO and propose that 5% RCA penalty. So if they mask grade this site, they will be providing at least 30% RCA. The buffers that are proposed as well to the north, west, and south of the property are all 10-foot type B. This is consistent with what the UDO typically requires for houses of this size. Along Mount Zion Church Road, however, they've increased the width. The UDO typically requires a 10-foot type A along a road of this type. The applicant has proposed a 30-foot type B buffer, and they've also proposed that a berm will be constructed along Mount Zion Church Road where significant vegetation does not exist. So that's about approximately 3 times wider. The proposed development is consistent with the Apex Transportation Plan. The PUD proposes a single full movement entrance opposite Medoc Mountain Lane. Mount Zion Church Road is an existing 2-lane minor collector street as designated on the Thoroughfare and Collector Street Plan. The PUD shall provide sidewalks along both sides of all the internal streets and construct the full frontage improvements along Mount Zion Church Road per the transportation plan. The developers also propose that they shall construct single-lane eastbound and westbound approaches with stop control from the development. Based on the Bike Apex and Parks, Recreation, and Greenways master plan, greenways and parks are not identified on this property. On August 28, 2019, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission recommended a fee in lieu. I have a slight typo in my staff report. One of the paragraphs says that fee in lieu is per acre. It is not, it is per unit. With 46 single-family units, the total fee in lieu would be $156,000, 282 cents. Planning staff recommends approval of the rezoning as submitted by the applicant. Planning board heard this at their meeting last night, and they unanimously recommended approval as well. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer them for you. And the applicant, of course, is also here.
Questions from council?
Is the striped area, green area, is that the RCA?
It is, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any others?
Would a high visibility crossing on Mount Zion Church Road be part of the plan, possibly at the site plan level, or does it need to be guaranteed in the zoning to make sure it happens?
Generally speaking, it could be done either way. I'll actually leave that up to Russell to answer since he's our transportation expert. I have seen it go both ways, however.
Okay.
We'd have to study it first before we could recommend a crosswalk.
Okay. I just, it's not, it's kind of isolated there, and if there's not a way to, like if they want to walk to the high school from there, the middle school, they're going to need to be able to cross the road and go through that neighborhood, right?
Yeah, the issue we run into is low volume crosswalks on secondary roads like that don't necessarily improve safety. What they can do is actually create a problem with people expecting they're going to be safe, and they walk out in front of oncoming cars thinking they're going to yield. So we have to make sure to study it to make sure it's high volume, it's visible, it's actually going to, be a warranted crosswalk. And there are warrants for studying crosswalks.
Okay. So if it's not warranted, what's the procedure to make sure they can cross safely in that spot?
If it's not warranted, then then we would not recommend a crosswalk at that location. Then they would have to cross without a crosswalk, or they would have to be in a car.
Okay.
Or to be clear, take the sidewalk to another intersection that has an approved crossing.
Correct. The preference would be to extend the sidewalk to stop-controlled intersections where they can make a crossing, a safe crossing at those locations. Part of the issue we're running into is as crosswalks have started being recommended, not just in Apex but other municipalities, we're starting to run into issues. DOT has begun to push back on some of these because there are a lot of unwarranted crosswalks are starting to be installed. People have this expectation of safety. They're not being installed based on nationally, recommended guidelines. So it creates an issue for us. They have to be maintained, and without good justification, we run into an issue where we're basically trying to predict everywhere somebody needs to cross the road, we're installing crosswalks, and we're diminishing the value of those crosswalks where they're actually needed.
Okay. So in this neighborhood, in the absence of a neighborhood maybe to the north or to the south, so is there what's the plan for making it walkable, if anything?
Well, I think the applicant probably needs to address that if you're asking for off-site sidewalk extensions, because sometimes as part of zonings, applicants may volunteer sidewalk extensions, but we don't want to commit to mid-block crosswalks that we can't guarantee will be warranted or be safe.
Are there any there's not any nearby activated street crosswalks, are there, in this vicinity?
No, we have a sidewalk extension. We just finished the multi-use path on the north side between Blazing Trail and Whistling Quail at that intersection that goes to the high school. And as you may remember, we had a mid-block crosswalk at the intersection on the west side of the high school. We actually removed that because of safety issues and got students routed to a new mid-block crosswalk. And at that location, we have a high concentration of pedestrians. It was a warranted crosswalk, and we are putting in rapid flash signals at that based on those warrants.
What goes into the warranting of the crosswalks currently?
My understanding, it's around 10 to 15 pedestrians in an hour on a regular basis. So when you look at locations like, for instance, an amenity center for a neighborhood, you typically don't, have, for a medium-sized neighborhood, you typically don't have that many people crossing in an hour. Again, it's, we can't provide crosswalks everywhere someone wants to cross the street. Like, for instance, my car is parked across the street on Hunter Street. I will cross Hunter Street today. I won't be in a marked crosswalk, and because one is not warranted at that location.
Okay. With the intersection, the Mount Zion Church Road, Richardson Road intersection, it's at a bad angle right now. And so, can you explain a little bit the future of that intersection if you had your way and made it as safe and good of an intersection as possible?
Yeah, it is a sharp angle with a Y, and Richardson Road also takes a turn. I guess if we could advance back a little bit to a map that shows more of an overall picture, it'd be better. So with this, it would be ideal based on DOT standards to get a 1,200-foot spacing, which would mean taking Mount Zion Church Road another 500 feet away from the intersection, which is typically not something we do. It's just not practical. It's already about 700 feet. In the future, Richardson Road's a 4-lane divided road. So the curve is actually going to shift west, which actually does help the alignment. It gives you more room to be able to provide a more squared up 90-degree tie-in. But it still should be realigned a little bit more than it currently would be based on the Richardson Road realignment. So I'd probably take it another 100 to 200 feet further north along Richardson Road if I could. I think you can do that without getting into this property, or maybe just a minor impact on the corner of this property that's currently being considered. But it's a major impact to these two properties. Unless, even if this moves forward for development, it could be an issue for future development, and it might require town action for acquisition at that point.
Okay. But what I heard you say was that southeast corner of the neighborhood, I mean, obviously you wouldn't want a house built right at the very edge of the corner if we want to try to... Correct.
Yeah, to give you an idea of scale, I mean, this is about, this is 700 feet from the intersection at Hume Olive up to the intersection at Mount Zion Church. So if you take it another couple hundred feet, you're ending up about here, which you can make a low-speed curve because you're coming into a stop-controlled intersection. It's not going to be a signal in the future. So, I mean, that would be a reasonable alignment. You can't guarantee long-term that it'll be full movement. If it's a 4-lane roadway with a median, DOT current standards typically require 1,200-foot spacing. For an upgrade of an existing road, they might allow less. You also might have something like a directional crossover where you could go to right in, right out in the future. But it's not typical that you would do a major realignment that would have a large impact on this property because Typically we make the best alignment possible, but we're not going to cut an existing thoroughfare, take it through another property just to meet basically a new standard, a modern standard, as if it was a brand new roadway.
Okay.
And you may want to ask about transportation plan. Do we show an alignment on the transportation plan of this, or realignment? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's as Russell described.
Yeah. It's a minor realignment, so it's not something we would anticipate impacting this property.
When do you plan to have that done? That's going to be a while off.
Yeah, we don't have a realignment programmed. For issues like this, just like Apex Barbecue Road, we do review the list of potentially hazardous intersections that the state publishes every year. That's based on historical crash data over the previous 5 years. Sometimes intersections come on and off the list because it's not necessarily linear when it comes to traffic growth. Sometimes, even though a road may become more busy, crashes may go down, so that's why you want to collect enough data. You also want to look at those crashes and make sure those are preventable crashes, because some of those aren't necessarily preventable with the realignment. So once they do, if they do score high enough, sometimes the state will look at those and they'll devote some safety funds toward improving the intersection. There's obviously opportunities for Apex to partner in those, but the question is whether or not the town wants to invest in secondary roadway realignments, depending on what the crash experience is there. So it would be something we'd have to program in our CIP if we wanted to do it.
Okay. Anything else for staff? All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to speak, or a representative thereof?
Evening again, Mr. Mayor. Still Jeff Roach, Peak Engineering and Design.
Good evening.
Here representing the developer tonight. Normally I would go into a real quick thing, but I think I first want to address Mr. Gant's 2 questions. The first about the sidewalk. We have, as part of our discussion, we have always committed to looking at a high-vis crosswalk at that location. Like Russell mentioned, we can't commit to it at a zoning condition because we don't know, A, is if DOT will approve it, B, is does it even meet warrants. We are going to look into it, and if we can get a crosswalk high-vis there, we will absolutely do it. Committed to that, and I think I've talked to everybody here and said exactly the same thing, that we would do that. Second thing I want to answer is the realignment. Remember, we have a 30-foot buffer along the frontage of Mount Zion Church Road. As part of that 30-foot buffer, that also becomes a possible taking location, so that if something happens, if the realignment is tight, there is some area. There won't be a house built right up against Mount Zion Church Road that will come into play with a condemnation, depending on what, of course, the centerline radius is for that road. So we did look at the transportation plans as we were planning this out, and the property, the 5 that are for sale are because of a death in the family. So it's moving from one generation to the next. They're not going to live there. They were kind of skipped over with the Parkside at Bella Casa construction, with the town's new electric facility at the north end of Mount Zion, with Buckhorn Preserve, with McKenzie Ridge, with all the other. You almost look at them, they're almost a donut hole in the middle here. So this is kind of the natural progression of development working through here. So I think both issues are being looked at, have been looked at, and we'll try to mitigate as we go through the master subdivision plan, not so much as a zoning issue. So just my 2 cents, Mr. Gant. To go along with that, I really want to appreciate, there were a number of neighbors that are here. We had 2 neighborhood meetings. The first one, we ended up with about 80 questions, and we made a number of significant changes to the plans throughout that process. We also worked with Mr. Moore early on. He had a question and concern about townhomes after our first neighborhood meeting. One of the largest, most significant changes to the plan is we originally proposed 46 single family or 65 townhomes. We've removed townhomes at the request of staff, at request of Mr. Moyer, at request of the neighbors, and in our discussions with all the council members have basically said that from the last about 30 days or so, that no townhomes will be here. That's why the building elevations are only single family. So we appreciate staff's support doing this. We appreciate staff making the presentation tonight, showing the additional architectural features that are there. I saw Mr. Jensen's eyebrows go up when we started talking about the zero entry homes. Remember, Mr. Jensen, that's only for the units that are committing to the first floor master. So the age in place, the older citizens that are buying homes to either be near grandkids, have that option for a first floor master as well on some of the units. I don't anticipate every unit being first floor. because then you've basically isolated who you can sell to. So that is a kind of a response to your question. A couple other things that I want to point out just to make sure that everybody, staff, the 30-foot berm or 30-foot landscape buffer across Mount Zion Church Road, the standard is 10. We went with 30 because there are 6 single-family homes that were built in the last 5 years that are directly across that we'll be looking at this subdivision. We want to protect their view corridors too.
May I ask you one question?
Yes, absolutely.
On the 30-foot buffer, if Mount Zion is widened, would that buffer in part go away?
It is my understanding that that Mount Zion is a minor collector street with a 60-foot right-of-way, that we are actually doing the widening to bring it to the current ultimate section for Mount Zion Church Road. Okay. So we don't anticipate unless, and I'll say something, I don't know if Russell or staff agrees with this, but my opinion is that with the opening of, through Bella Casa at the electric facility there, I think that will take a lot more traffic. Mount Zion will actually probably reduce in traffic. With the connection to the north, it gives more people through Bella Casa and Buckhorn Preserve a way to go east-west versus coming down and then trying to go back north again. So, but we are committing to building the curb and gutter, the pavement widening required to get to the ultimate section, along with sidewalk on our side of the road that plays into, again, the pedestrian crosswalk. So, yes, to answer that question, Mr. Jensen. We did remove, we at one point had a second point of access onto Mount Zion Church Road. If you read through all the conditions or all the questions and comments at the first neighborhood meeting, that was a large concern for everybody. So we removed that single point of access. We set up four different stubs or 3 different stubs to adjacent properties for future development, interconnecting when adjacent properties go to redevelop and rezone as well. So we're looking big picture, not just at this 11.3 acres. I do want to also point out, staff made the comment to RCA. We submitted prior to the recent ordinance change that increased the mass grading penalty, if you'll call it that, from 2% to 5%. This could have stayed at 2% and followed the original adoption of that. We've gone ahead and said, hey, look, we think it's the right thing to do, so we've increased it to the 5. I do want to point out one thing that Mr. Jensen brought up. He asked a question about the green area. Let me find it in the exhibit. That's okay. Probably the best thing, Mr. Jensen, yes. This will mostly be RCA. I think long-term development patterns in this area will actually have a road come through here. So because what it will do, it will connect other parcels. You can see this is Forenza Drive in this location. If you can see the cursor on Mount Zion, Mr. Jensen.
No, I can't.
Okay, there you go. Right there, that's an existing street. Buckhorn Preserve has an existing stub right in this area here. So what we anticipate is the development pattern north of this property, the stubs coming out of our property. And just so you're clear, this will probably not all be RCA. We'll probably have a 50-foot strip through there that will be set aside for future road construction, road connectivity. More of a transportation overall planning for the area is what it is. Those were kind of the big changes that we had. I also want to point out finally that the legislative considerations, we've looked through them and feel that the project meets them. We meet the adopted town plans, the 2045 plan, the Bike Apex plan, long-range plans that Apex has. So with that, I will save my last 2.5 minutes, and I look for your support tonight and here to answer any questions you may have of me.
All right, thank you, Mr. Roach. Questions for the applicant?
I have a question. Did you have any thoughts about adding solar to?
Oh, yes, sir. I apologize, Mr. Jensen. I just happened to write something there when I was sitting in the thing. If it's okay with staff, I'll give this to the planner, but I will read it. And this is language that we've used in the past, Mr. Jensen. So the developer builder shall construct 4 solar photovoltaic PV systems with a minimum of 3 kilowatt capacity throughout the development. The lots with solar PV systems shall be identified on the final plats, which may be amended from time to time. Solar installation shall be completed or under construction prior to 90% of the building permits being issued for the development. So that gets you the 4 at 3 kilowatts, and that's the town's form. So that will become a condition of the zoning approval.
All right.
Hopefully zoning approval this evening.
Okay. Anything else?
Just a comment, it sounds like you have worked well with the neighborhood surrounding and that you've taken into consideration their thoughts in this and readjusted appropriately, so I applaud you for that.
And I just want to point out one last thing. I wish Councilwoman Dozier was here. Councilwoman Dozier had a Bella Costa Legislative Committee meeting that she actually invited me to. So it actually gave me a platform to speak with a number of neighbors that were very outspoken at the first neighborhood meeting, to show them that we listened to them, that we brought their changes back. So I appreciate you saying that, and I hope that's how I try to approach all of our zonings. Sometimes we just can't meet in the middle, but I think this is one that we worked really hard to do so.
Okay. If there's nothing else for the applicant, well, I'll open the public hearing. Or further, looking at the sheet, no one else signed up except for Mr. Roach, and he's already spoke, although he has 2 minutes in reserve. So I will close the public hearing and refer the matter to council for discussion or possible motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second for approval with the condition that was added tonight. Okay. Any discussion on that? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Roach. This takes us to public hearing number 4, and this is from our long-range planner discussing the Apex Transit Circular Study draft recommendations.
I'm surprised he had 5 seconds.
The right spot. Keep going. Keep going. Hold on here. Almost. Okay. All right, here we go. Jenna and I are actually going to jointly present this tonight. I'm Shannon Cox, the Long Range Planning Manager. The purpose of this study has really been about implementing transit. So in February, you adopted the Advanced Apex 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan. That plan indicated that our highest priority for transit is a new local bus route going up and down 55. This study has been intended to take us from vision, line on a map, to how do we get a bus on the ground. We have conducted this study in partnership with the town of Cary, represented tonight here to help us answer any questions, and in coordination with the Town of Apex Transit Committee, and Nick has joined us from the Transit Committee, thank you. We've conducted targeted outreach along the proposed transit corridor, and that's resulted in a capital and operations plan, a marketing plan, and financial plan for this first transit route. All leading up to a potential application for funding. So Jenna and I are going to describe some of the pros and cons of a new local bus route to you. Then I'll turn it over to her and she'll go through the details of the study, the bus route, the stops, the service scenario recommendations. We'll describe some funding opportunities as well as next steps. And then we will wrap everything up with a proposed amendment to the transit plan map. And that's the only action that we're requesting from you tonight, is to amend the transit plan map to adjust the priority route. So first, let's start with some drawbacks. Starting a new transit route in Apex is an investment of both staff time as well as money. And we will give you some specifics about that tonight, but it is a commitment. From the public, we did hear some concern about traffic on 55 and adding a bus to that congested roadway. However, you'll see that we do have buses using 55 already. Finally, we've been told by communities who've taken this on already that it will take some time to catch on, and we do need to be prepared for that. So we may have some empty buses for a while, but it will catch on.
What size are these buses? Are they regular?
I think I've got a picture in a couple slides, but they would be 19-seat, what they call cutaway buses, but we'll show you that.
Well, while we're doing questions, so you said the vote is on the map tonight.
Yes.
So will there be another vote for like other stuff on it? Or is it going to be, this is the last thing we're going to vote on before implementation begins?
No, so we are open to any thoughts that you have, any input that you want to share on the study tonight. But then what you'll be doing to implement is going through the budget and CIP process.
Okay.
So that's really your vote on implementation.
Okay, but like the things like the, like the alternative 3 with the Sunday thing versus not, that one will be more of funding. We'll kind of decide based on the funding we provide, whether that's alternative or not. Is that my understanding?
So tonight, we will share with you the Transit Committee's recommendation. And if you would like to share your thoughts and input, we will take that now. We can adjust what we apply for and can continue to take that input and refine the alternative as we move forward.
Okay.
But there isn't a vote on that tonight.
Okay.
Does that help? Okay. Okay, so some of the pros of a local bus. Primarily, it's to serve people who need a ride, and there are people who need a ride in Apex. We were out on the corridor. We talked to people who ride the regional buses to get here, to work in our restaurants. Sometimes they wait 3 hours. We heard from students who are excited about the independence of a local bus, get from school to some recreation, have a little bit of time to spend with friends. We also heard from a lot of seniors who are worried about losing their independence. So for them, it's really about maintaining quality of life. This would also serve those who choose not to drive. Many people are choosing transit because of their concern for the environment or because they want to spend time on their phone and computer instead of driving. We would also be leveraging our citizens' investment. So there's a sales tax that's going to fund the Wake Transit Plan. Part of that plan set aside funding for places like Apex to implement transit. So we would be leveraging that investment. Finally, this would connect to the region. So to demonstrate that, if we consider Apex as the center of the world, which why not? That's right. So that we already have a bus going between Apex and RTP. That's the 311. It's a commuter route, primarily mornings and evening hours. It runs along 55. We have a route called the 305 going between Apex and Raleigh. It's currently a commuter route. We're expecting it to be expanded to all-day service as early as next year. It would also touch 55. And there is a new route you already heard about called the Holly Springs Express. Will be operated by Go Cary, going from Holly Springs through Apex to Cary, starting service in January, and that will also touch 55. So Go Apex, our first route, would connect to all of those regional systems.
Are they very loaded, those other systems, in terms of density of use?
So the HSX route hasn't started, so we don't have any numbers for that. The 305 and the 311, I don't have numbers for pickups in Apex, but the most recent data I have shows 9 boardings per hour for 305 and 7 per hour for the 311. We are expecting regionally for ridership to increase as frequency, span, and coverage increase. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenna.
Good evening. So I'm going to introduce the proposed bus route and bus stops. So this map shows the existing bus route and the adopted transit plan map in yellow. And then the black extension is what we're asking you to take action on today. So this shows an extension into downtown Apex based on the feedback that we've received from the public, as well as an extension further west to serve Publix Point and the Western Wake Crisis Ministry. And this route was designed to serve commercial areas in many of the commercial areas in Apex, and those are shown in red, as well as apartment complexes, and those are shown in purple. And to follow the direction of the route, it's planned to start at town campus, and then you follow the blue arrows. So this map you have in front of you, and there's also copies over to the right if anyone would like to take a closer look. And this one shows the proposed route in yellow and also shows the proposed bus stops. And those are color-coded based on the anticipated ridership. And there's also black stops, and the black ones are the existing regional stops. And the color coding for the other stops is based on the anticipated ridership. And these projections are based on the existing land uses, demographics, and the public input that we receive throughout the public engagement process. So bus stop needs. Those black stops that you see on the map in front of you will be improved through a regional project, so they're not proposed to be improved by the town as there's a separate funding source. But the other 41 stops would need to meet minimum standards, so this includes accessible pedestrian facilities, as well as an accessible landing pad, lighting, and signage. And then additional improvements beyond the minimum standards correspond with the anticipated ridership. And there are also a couple cases where even though low ridership is anticipated, we're recommending that we install a bench, such as at the Western Wake Crisis Ministry and at the Wake Med Healthplex. Based on who we anticipate to use those stops, they might need additional amenities.
Can I ask about the regional one? So,
Sure.
like the Holly Springs one, I noticed there's no stops yet, but there will be. So, is it going to be recommended that once that route becomes finalized, or I guess maybe it already is, those will turn black, and we'll do the improvements at those as well?
Or that one, it's shown right now as medium ridership, and I believe that's one that we're proposing for a bench, but the black ones right now are for the 305 and the 311.
Right. I'm saying the ones down there near Walmart are going to be regional routes theoretically, right?
Right.
Next year, you said. So.
Yes, but sorry, go ahead.
Can we just kind of do this? Or can we kind of do it at the same time, make sure that route's provided for as well as this one? I mean, is that the plan?
So, as part of beginning the HSX service, we would provide the minimum requirements to make it accessible. Basically, the landing pad, the pedestrian facilities already in place, and route signage.
Okay. And the shelter, would a shelter be part of the regional stops?
Well, we have a couple of locations where we're proposing shelters, but not to be completed as part of this project. We're going to wait and look at the ridership numbers and evaluate to see if we should install shelters.
Okay. Are you going to use this, like, well, Wake County did a thing where it was like, I think 10, I forget the number, but they kind of said everything above a certain number, we're going to put a shelter. Is that going to be kind of how we're going to evaluate it as well?
Well, yeah, I don't know the exact numbers that we're going to look at, but we'll try to be consistent with the region to determine how we add additional facilities.
Okay.
So the report that you have as an attachment to the staff report looks at a number of scheduled paratransit and fare alternatives, but today I'm just going to present the recommended alternative that the Apex Transit Advisory Committee presented. So the recommended schedule for Go Apex Route 1 would have a frequency of 60 minutes and provide service from Monday through Saturday from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. The pros of this recommended schedule is that it provides an all-day service to an area where there's currently no transit service. And it also allows for transfers to the regional routes that Shannon mentioned. And it includes Saturday service, which is something that not all circulators provide. So this allows for people to use Go Apex Route 1 to complete shopping and recreational trips on the weekends. And the service span starting at 6 a.m. and going till 10 p.m. allows it to be used for all trip purposes, and also for those who work later into the evening. They can still use this route to take it to and from work.
Is it recommended not to change the times, even if it's on a Saturday? Because I think I read that there was a proposed 7 a.m., I think, if we had done kind of separate Saturday and Sunday service.
Yeah, I believe it was alternative 1 showed if we went with Sunday service, it would be from 7 to 9. But yeah,
You
Is
recommend the same times,
for Saturday, we were recommending 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., but that's something that could be adjusted.
okay.
So just to provide one little bit of input, we're not showing it here, but in our discussion with the transit committee, we did discuss shortening the hours on Saturday, and there was some pros and cons that were discussed. At this point, we wanted to see if we could implement the service with the same span, but they did give us that feedback that that would be the next kind of thing that they would cut if we need to lower our costs.
Okay.
And then there are some cons of this recommended schedule, and that's that the 60-minute frequency does require advanced trip planning. So if the bus only comes once an hour, you kind of have to figure out how long you're going to stay at your destination to make sure you don't miss the bus and then have to wait another hour. And then also the recommended schedule doesn't include Sunday service.
How punctual are these buses typically? Are they, it's got to be traffic dependent.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm Kevin Weirach. I'm the transit planner for the town of Cary. Currently, our local buses run at about 85% on-time performance, and that's the standard that our contractor is expected to adhere to when we're evaluating service. So.
Thank you. That's pretty good.
I was going to ask maybe now's the time. So what's been exactly the Cary interaction with Apex? And just you guys have had the bus routes, and you say you know from experience, but is it basically providing feedback about what you guys learned when you've done this versus as someone doing it for the first time, provide the knowledge, I guess.
Right, and we've been happy to work with the town of Apex staff on this project. Since these costs to starting a transit service it's a pretty high barrier to entry. They have asked for our professional expertise on what they can expect from different scenarios, different types of service that would best fit the town's needs.
And how long ago did Cary implement their local circulators?
We've been in service since the mid-2000s, so they've been around for about 15 years now.
Okay.
If I could ask real quick, so you've been around about 15 years, you said?
With fixed route service, yes.
How's the ridership been?
Right now, we are currently increasing ridership year over year. We've added service as part of the Wake Transit Plan. Right now, our local routes are about a little bit over 6 passengers per hour for this fiscal year and still rising. We had a little bit of a lull a few years ago due to various national and regional trends with transit service, and due in part to the Wake Transit Plan expansion of service, due to fare decreases that we implemented in July to coincide with a regional fare strategy implemented by all of the Wake Transit partners, including Go Raleigh, Go Triangle, Go Durham, et cetera. We've seen about a 10% year-to-date growth in ridership compared to last fiscal year.
Well, on that note, and maybe this is a request for Shannon, I'd love to see some metrics from Cary on that. If they've produced any kind of chart, graph, something to describe ridership and how that's measured and what kind of trends they've seen over time. I don't know if it exists, so they could just send it over, or if it's. But I think it would be good for if you haven't already seen something. I would love to know what the history of ridership looks like. What's the growth curve? I know you said earlier it takes a while for people to catch on, right? And you kind of got to run an empty bus for a little bit before people see the predictability. But it'd be interesting to know, is it 2 years? Is it 10 years? Does it fluctuate up and down with the economy? It'd be nice for us to know. I think Councilman Moyer, based on his question, would probably love to see that.
I'm sure that we can get some historic and trend information.
Thank you.
Both from Town of Cary as well as in Wake Forest, which we used as another example because they have a local circulator. Their ridership is actually quite high, around 7.9. And then we will have some performance measures that we will need to reach if we implement this service. I also just wanted to respond to Mr. Gantz's question regarding our partnership with the Town of Cary. We partnered with them on this planning study with the intent that if we move forward, they would provide the Go Apex service. Branded as Go Apex, but run by the town of Cary. And our transit committee, kind of before we move forward with this plan, did ask us, to investigate some of our options. So I just wanted to also mention that the Go Cary service has some of the highest customer service ratings across the region as well for their transit service. Just to share that.
May I ask a quick question, I guess, if you don't mind? I have the memory of a goldfish, so I have to get this out right away. For you mentioned that it's slow to get started. Is there a program where you advertise to people rather than just have them spot the bus?
Yeah.
Is that what you're going to be doing, something like that, or free fees for the first month or something like that? I don't know.
They're probably going to get to a marketing plan.
I suppose so.
At some point, right?
I'll listen.
Not in this presentation, but we did include a marketing plan in the transit circulator study, and it includes both a number of ways that we can reach out to the community to incentivize them to ride the bus and let them know about the service. And also, some of the recommendations are to start with fare-free service for a period to get people to try Go Apex.
And one question about the bus, is each bus equipped with a ramp for people that are disabled?
Yes.
Before you go on, I know you want to go on, but the last bullet on there, the no Sunday service, I would love to see us consider that, because I know several elderlies who only go out on Sunday.
Okay.
And they would absolutely find, whether they're in their own home around town or out at one of the places that I see that the bus intentionally goes past, many of them would use it for getting to church if they had the opportunity, and many of them would find that, I think, convenient. I also, these days, I find very little difference between a Saturday and a Sunday when I'm out and driving around. If I didn't look at my calendar, I might not know the difference looking at traffic. So unless that's based on some real hard data, I would say give Sunday a consideration as well.
But the survey said Sunday was less popular. That was one of the charts in there.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's going to be for sure, but yeah.
Okay.
But another thing to note is all of these recommendations include pros and cons, but all the cons could be addressed through additional funding. So we could have a great service.
Wait, let's see what the town manager says. Hey, Mr. Town Manager, can you do that kind of thing?
I can do anything you
Yeah. You can? All right. What do you need? Money. Okay.
All right.
All right, thank you.
No, but thank you for pointing that out. So the paratransit service is a requirement that goes along with a fixed route service. So it's required for individuals whose disability prevents them from using the fixed route. And it has to serve the area within a 3/4 mile around the fixed route. So this map shows that 3/4 mile buffer. And all of the trip start and end points would need to be in this service area. Another thing to note about paratransit service is that the fare for a paratransit trip may be no more than twice that of the adult base fare for the fixed route. So if it's a fare-free service, the paratransit service would also be fare-free. And if the fare was $1.25, the cost of a paratransit trip would be $2.50. And during this study, we explored two paratransit service models, one being the FTA minimum model. So this is the minimum that we can legally provide, and that's to limit paratransit service to individuals with a disability. The other option that we considered is the Go Cary model, and that expands paratransit service to seniors 60 and older. And then some pros of the FTA minimum model, which the Transit Committee recommended, is that it encourages use of the fixed route. So if the paratransit's only available to those with a disability, everyone else will be encouraged to use the fixed route and increase the ridership on that service. And it also increases the reliability of paratransit for those who really need it. So you're less likely to encounter a situation where you have to give trip denials because only those who really need the service are making trip reservations.
And we're talking about a smaller bus here.
Yes, that's normally, a much smaller bus that's accessible. And then also this This recommendation establishes a service that can be maintained, and we've learned from our partners at Go Carry that it's difficult to start with a very robust paratransit service, because if there's ever a time where you have to cut back, it's very difficult because people have become reliant upon that service. So it's better to start a little small when it comes to paratransit and then increase the service if the need and the funds are there. And then some cons of this recommendation is that the service isn't provided to seniors, and also the start and end points have to be within that 3/4 mile buffer.
And that 3/4 mile buffer, that's the FTA minimum?
Yes.
Okay, so we could technically expand it then?
Yes.
If we needed to?
Mhm. And then during this study, we explored 2 fare options, one being the fare-free model and the other being the regional fare model. And so the adult base fare under the regional fare model, which the Transit Committee recommended, is $1.25, and then a day pass is $2.50. And it's also important to note that under the regional fare structure, it's fare-free for seniors and youth, and that's important for us because those are 2 of our target audiences. And we pulled some data about the Youth Go Pass, and we found that 460,000 trips were made using the Youth Go Pass over the past year, and that's in Wake, Durham, and Orange counties. And then some pros of using the regional fare structure is that it does result in regional consistency, and it allows us to generate some revenue, even though we don't anticipate that to be a substantial amount of money. And then through mobile ticketing integration, we can leverage fare capping. And the way that works is you get one base pass at $1.25, and then if you get one more that day, you've spent $2.50, so you're automatically bumped up to the day pass. So that could be used on Go Apex and on the other regional routes. And then similarly for the week and month pass. So if you use this service frequently, you might actually be paying a lot less than $1.25 per trip. And then having the fare on the fixed route allows us to have a fare on the paratransit route, which then encourages use of the fixed route since it's half the price for the ticket. And then some cons of having a fare is that does lower our anticipated ridership in comparison to a fare-free service. And it is less convenient because you need to have cash or a ticket in order to board the bus.
The one thing I noticed was the price per ride was higher as well, as a con.
Oh, that's
25 versus 19 or 18, I noticed, or whatever the metric was.
Yeah, because we have fewer people boarding the bus, so it goes up. So this table is a summary of the recommendations. So the first one, the $460,000, is the cost of the capital bus stop improvements. So those I mentioned previously with the map that you have in front of you. And the next one is the annual fixed route expense, and at about $450,000. And then you see the revenues there. And one thing to note is that the annual paratransit expense is pretty impractical at this number when you look at the ridership. So we're going to be bringing this number down. We're exploring alternatives to provide paratransit service, and this is also being explored at the regional level to have a whole system for the region. And then Shannon's going to discuss some funding opportunities.
Thanks, Jenna. So you saw the costs on the previous slide. That's for the recommended alternative from the Transit Committee. There are funding opportunities region-wide. So the first one listed here is the Community Funding Area Program. That's what we use to help fund this study. We can also apply for funding for a capital and operations project to get this route moving. So this requires a minimum of a 50% match. We would apply this January to have an agreement in place a year from now. One of the drawbacks is that based on the numbers that we've seen, the cost assumptions that are the foundation for this program are too low. So we need to be looking for other funding. And we're also working with the region to address some of those potential gaps in that funding program. So another opportunity is the LAP program. I think you're all familiar with this, We're using it for some of our big road projects, major pedestrian projects. We can also apply for transit improvements. So this could be used for those capital improvements to build our bus stops. This would require a minimum of a 20% match. We would apply this October with an agreement next fall. The drawback here is it's federal funding, so it adds tremendous requirements. Finally, there's an annual Wake Transit work plan. So projects that are in the Wake Transit plan that are not part of the community funding area go through this annual cycle. And we have been encouraged to go ahead and apply for this as well for our paratransit, which is where we're really seeing the funding gap. So potentially it could be funded through that source.
With the top row, if there was no cap, what would the amount be?
So, so let's go back. So the first year, we would be applying for half of the 460,000, our capital expenses, so the 230. If we assume it takes about 9 months to get those built, and we would operate our route for about 3 months, then we would be applying for a portion of the fixed route, the 457 and the 374 in the first year. And then every subsequent year, we would be applying for half of the, I can't do that math in my head, roughly 800,000, so $400,000.
400,000, and if 360 was the cap?
326 is the expected cap.
Expected cap?
Right, because it depends in part on the revenues or the total funding that will be available. The cap is 30% for any one applicant on the total funding available each year.
So what if no other municipalities do a project in Wake County?
So the cap can be waived. The Transit Planning Advisory Committee could make that decision. However, we are expecting other municipalities to apply for funds as well.
One quick question on the capital bus stop improvement expenses. That's just for the bus stop. What do the buses cost for this?
So the buses are incorporated in the operating expenses. That is included in the dollar figure that Town of Cary gave us for their lease for the buses.
They lease?
Yes,
They lease.
so we would not be buying our own buses, right?
Okay. All right. I was just trying to get a feel for size of bus, cost of bus, and whether it would be worthwhile to reduce the bus size, have another driver, and kind of considering the ridership, certainly early on. It's a big bus for the number of riders at this point. Is that correct?
It is the smallest bus that we use in fixed route revenue service. So if you've seen some of our buses, we have the larger 35-foot buses. Go Triangle uses those. We wouldn't be using those for this service. We would be using the smaller ones with the engine out in front, kind of like a small school bus.
Okay.
And regardless of which vehicle we use, our hourly rate that we charge our contractor is still the same. Or that they charge us is still the same.
Yes, I understand. Thank you.
So that's the picture of the style of bus that we would be using. So where we really anticipate we will be able to lower our costs, as Jenna mentioned, is that paratransit expense. If you look at the cost compared to the estimated ridership, that's where we're really focusing our investigations. And we are talking with Go Wake Access, if you've seen them around, about whether or not they could provide this service for Apex. We're also looking into some other options, but if we could get to an approach where we're paying per trip instead of to always have a vehicle here even when it's not being used, that's the number that we think we can lower quite a bit.
And was that number the same with the Go Cary model versus the paratransit model only? 'Cause I was confused by how that could even be the case.
So where we could, I believe it was the same, but where we could get into trouble is if we get a lot of trips.
Right, then we'd have a hard time picking up the.
With one vehicle.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Are those funding opportunities contingent on the charging a fare versus not?
No, they're not.
Okay.
And so the arrow here is kind of showing, we have the application period this fall and early winter. You'll be going through your budget and CIP process prior to the agreements next fall. So that's where we were saying in the beginning, that's really where the final decision is made about whether the town will move forward. So these are the next steps. We've talked about them a little bit, investigating alternative paratransit options. We're working on a customer service plan, as well as looking at integrating with regional GPS tracking and mobile applications. If you have further questions, we would be happy to try and answer those. Also, if you have thoughts or input that you'd like to share with us at this time. But the action that we're requesting is to amend the transit plan to show the updated route that Jenna described so that we can go forward with these applications. Thank you.
Question on the route. Is there a reason why it turns around and retraces its path rather than perhaps going down Olive Chapel Road? It seems, I understand that Beaver Creek is a busy location and there expect to be a lot of drop-offs and pickups, but is it necessary because I'm also thinking that Olive Chapel Road might also provide some opportunities for stops with the high density of residents between Olive Chapel Road and Apex Barbecue, that there may be opportunities for people to get over to the bus route, whereas now they will not, absolutely not go. Anybody in Scotts Mills not gonna be able to catch the bus. Anybody who wants to go to, I don't know, the elementary school or St. Mary Magdalene or the little commercial area in there, or anybody who wants to leave there to go to downtown. I just wonder what the logic is for going right back through the shopping center.
So I think Kevin will be able to explain better than I can, but just one easy answer that I can give is our ability to pick up on both sides of 55 in this location. If we were to come back along Olive Chapel Road, we would only be picking up on one side of 55, and in some places it's difficult to cross there. But Kevin, you might want to add more to
Yeah, just to add to that, and that's most of the reason. We find that circulator routes, work better when you have both directions going on the same street. Now, obviously, that's not the case throughout the entire alignment here, but especially going through the high-density commercial area, Beaver Creek Commons, having the bus stop on both sides of the street is going to improve the productivity of the service. Even though it seems counterintuitive, you're trading coverage on the Olive Chapel Road for a little bit more service. What we've seen, especially in Go Carry with the routes along Maynard, which operate in a loop fashion right now, those are our lowest performing routes. They don't get much ridership. A lot of it has to do with the fact that it can be circuitous to go all the way around a loop if your destination is in the wrong direction of where that loop is going. That might be the same situation that people on Olive Chapel Road would run into here, especially if they're using it to get to Beaver Creek Commons. There's a scenario where they have to take the entire circulator route to go back up to Beaver Creek Commons, or vice versa. So that's one of the reasons why it stays on the same alignment going through that area.
Okay. And I get the concept of going to the end of the line, turning around 180 and coming back down the other side generally, but that's going to be that would not be a circular so much. That's more of a point to point. So this feels a little bit like we sort of have a hybrid here. We're sort of point to point and circular in some places. And I guess maybe it's just because we don't want to set up two routes yet. And maybe that's the next phase at some point, whenever we feel like it's time for that growth step. And I just see a lot of opportunity, from I don't know what it was, 95, 90, something like that. All of that area from Highway 55 to the current 540 was filled in with homes, and that's a very large area of potential riders that have no opportunity to look at this bus route because they're not near enough to it.
I understand what you're saying, and that is probably a growth opportunity. But just to give a little bit more background to what went into the 55 idea in the first place is that Western Wake Comprehensive Operational Analysis, which really looked closely at the propensity to use transit in Apex and our demographics and land uses. And that's really the study that kind of resulted in the 55 route. And then just to tie it back to the public feedback we received when we went out in the area, excuse me, we are touching most of the places that people really requested to have stops.
Okay.
I'd say the one area that we're not with this route is the library, and the 305 route will help with that.
Right. And yeah, I mean, to the other point, Olive Chapel, going down Olive Chapel doesn't mean that you can't take 55 south, because Zeno will get you there, right? You could come Olive Chapel, Peakway, Zeno, go right past Carrabba's, and then you're on 55, and then you could come south from there, if that's, assuming that's the route direction. I just hate to see all of those homes not have the opportunity. But that's my feedback, and you can do what you will with it.
Okay, thank you.
With the route, was there a discussion about using Hunter rather than the Peakway and turning left at the town campus? Because I'm seeing a lot of the blue low ridership stops there, and I know the plan talked about not wanting to cross the train as many times. So was that a discussion of an edit or not?
So Jenna or Kevin can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the primary reasons was the at-grade railroad crossing and trying to minimize those. Also, we received feedback about the desire to go to the Food Lion area over in Vineyard Station. Am I missing some of our decision points?
But there were also just a lot of general comments to provide service on the Peakway, so this makes it part of the Peakway.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm sure once the Southwest Connector is built, that may be an opportunity for us to rethink a path.
Am I seeing this correct in the staff report, that the net estimated cost is $796 to $816, depending on what fare, paratransit, minimum, table 1? I think my staff report is different than what you're showing right there, but so based on what you're showing right there, is my math right? It's about 800,000 net.
So you're probably looking at the full transit report, which had multiple alternatives for the number that you're referencing.
Right.
And so that's why it's different, is we just focused in on what the transit committee recommended in this presentation. So for the net annual operating costs, you'd be basically adding, at this point, the 374, 400, and the 457, 137, and subtracting the roughly 15,000.
So about, was that 800 roughly?
Somebody have a calculator?
801 or something like that.
820.
Minus 14.5
That's with the.
with the, about 820.
But we are working on lowering that paratransit cost.
Yeah.
So.
That's a big bite to chew with a lot of transportation issues we're trying to deal with in town. 820,000, and that's probably on the conservative side of expense and what it would cost to operate this. I think we might be a little, and I know we're not talking about budget right now, but I think we might be a little premature on the priorities that we set as a council and where we need to focus spending money. I'm not sure this fits into it. And I agree with what the mayor said about a big swath of, we talked about kids ridership and going to various places. I think you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, that whole area is left off. But I think we need to hit the brakes on it, honestly. I think we're going down a path of almost a point of no return. I mean, I appreciate all y'all's effort in putting all this together, but I just think it doesn't really fit with our priorities that we set as a council with improving transportation around town. But it's just my opinion.
Nice pun there, by the way, with brakes.
Oh,
No, I appreciate the effort that has gone into this, and I expect that we'll push forward with this, obviously by decreasing some of our expenses. But yeah, I definitely want to continue with this. I mean, there are a lot of people who could benefit from people who can't drive, who are too young to drive, who are disabled, who still need to get places within Apex. So.
I have a question. Kevin mentioned a number that the town of Cary is like 6 people per hour for ridership-ish, 7.1 or 6. That includes, that's all people, right? I mean, everybody that uses the plan, disabled, elderly, anybody, right?
I believe that's just your fixed route.
Right, on the fixed route services. So that includes Sunday service, late night service. That includes routes that we're currently trying to realign in order to gain more riders. It's a catch-all.
Yeah.
Right now, our highest performing route is about 10 passengers per hour during weekdays. That would be Route 5. And there's also some standards in the Wake Transit Plan so that to remain eligible for funding, routes need to hit certain performance standards by passengers per hour. Go Cary is subject to that. A proposed Go Apex service would be subject to a different set of guidelines under the community funding area program, should that be the chosen vehicle to fund the service.
And our initial performance measure, so we are given a little bit of time to ramp up our service and to market it. If we aren't hitting 6 passengers per hour within 3 years, then the region would work with us to look at why we're not, what we might be able to change to increase our ridership, and that would increase over time.
I guess I'm really at a loss a little bit on passengers. 6 passengers per hour, is that getting on per hour, or is that 6 passengers on the bus?
6 boardings per hour.
6 boardings per hour, okay.
Whether
That's
they're
what
on
I
a
thought
bus
it
for
was. but I
5
just-
minutes or 55 minutes of that hour.
Yeah, okay.
And I do just want to kind of remind everyone that there are opportunities to help with the funding. And I'm confident that we can leverage these opportunities. Maybe not all of them, but at least some of the help. And that's why they were put in place, to make transit for places like Apex viable. Anything else that we can try to answer or input that you'd like to share with us at this point?
so the question put before us is, do we want to change the map according to the recommendations?
And yes, and that's the public
So-
hearing portion, so.
I
Sure.
I guess if you're doing the input part, I made my own thoughts while I was chewing over this for hours this weekend. And I was with the transit committee on the no Sunday and the minimum one. But I thought the fares revenue was so low that the goal should be to get ridership. So I thought the fare free was the way to go. personally. And $20,000 out of 800,000 was like nothing. And I was like, okay. And the price per ride was lower with those other options. So that's what I noticed. And I think the price per ridership is an important metric trying to get the maximum utility out of the system.
And Wake Forest is free ridership, correct?
Wake Forest is fare free. Just to convey some of our discussion, because this is something that we've kind of mulled over a lot too. I went in this thinking that we would want to propose fare free. The kind of, I think, main discussion points around having a fare were that if we have a fare-free fixed route, we then have to have a fare-free paratransit route. And if we find a service that we're paying per trip, that, encouraging people to use the fixed route is beneficial. Then the other point that we discussed was, there's a train now, just that the mobile the integration with the regional fare. So I think Jenna described this, but basically if you pay once for a day for a, let's go back to this. If you pay your ticket and then you want to get on a Go Cary bus or a Go Raleigh bus, you wouldn't pay more than a day pass using multiple services if we're using the regional fare.
That's assuming that a lot of people are going to be using both.
That's right.
The regional and the local.
Yeah. So
do we have numbers on guesses about how much that would be, or from experience in Cary, how much people do that?
I could get you the info from our onboard rider service about how many of our riders on average switch to Go Triangle services, because we do connect with them. Overall, though, the idea of the region-wide mobile ticketing, we actually have just selected a vendor, and we should be implementing it this fiscal year, is to not only make it more easy to pay a fare, just buy it on your phone and scan it on the bus rather than looking for change or whatever else, but also to leverage the fare capping so that lower income riders are never paying more than the minimum that they need to for the services. There's a huge equity issue involved with that. So it's one of the ways that we're looking at simplifying transit for residents of this region to entice them to use it more often. A lot of times, especially before we all agreed on this simplified fare strategy, Go Cary's boarding for an adult fare was $1.50. Go Raleigh's was $1.25. It can be that alone can disincentivize people from using public transit just because it's so confusing to figure out how much money you need to bring with you.
Mm-hmm.
This is one way of avoiding all of that. Mm-hmm. And since we looked at fare-free scenarios, and then if Go Apex was to charge a fare, we looked at this just for consistency with the regional model.
Okay.
I have a question about the paratransit service. So if we go with a fare free here and we go with, say, Wake Access for paratransit coverage, would they still have free service through Wake Access, or would they charge them a fee for that?
So, yeah, it would have to be free. So the town would be paying, if we went with Go Wake Access, the town would be paying that, or, through joint funding with whatever regional funding we're able to secure.
What was the operational hours per week? Was it like 50? Was it more than that? Monday through Saturday with the Sunday off.
How many hours? You're taxing my math ability tonight.
78.
14 times 6?
Yeah, there you go.
74,
Thank you.
84 per week? I don't know.
84.
Yeah, it's 84.
I need my seventh grader with me.
I had some feedback for the county commissioners and ones in the room, but having a cap when Cary's getting BRT and Raleigh's getting BRT, having a cap in Apex to me is ridiculous, and there should be no cap. It should be half. We're only getting one fixed route or one regular route to Raleigh now, and we're paying a bunch of sales tax. So that would be my feedback to the county commission. I think that cap should go away.
I appreciate that feedback. We are kind of a guinea pig, I would say, in how this program will run. This is really the first year that anyone has tried it. The Transit Planning Advisory Committee and Campo in their role on leading the Community Funding Area Program is already setting up a work group to kind of take a look at how it's going, talk about some of the funding issues we may be uncovering, and look at things like that. So I'll be attending that. I can share that feedback.
There's a strong inequality in municipalities besides Morrisville, Cary, and Raleigh in this plan, and to cap it, yeah, I appreciate that.
All right. With that, I'll open the public hearing, and we have one person signed up, Susan Evans.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council members. Appreciate you having me. I am Susan Evans, one of your Wake County Board of Commissioners, and I do reside here in Apex at 2016 West Sterlington Place. I just wanted to come and offer my support for the direction in which the staff is proposing that you move with this initiative. I'm really pleased. I've participated in some of the input sessions. I think they've done an excellent job with garnering public engagement, and they're focusing on all the right things, in my opinion, and trying to determine who are the people that are most likely initially to use bus service in Apex and to draw the route accordingly. So as much as I would have liked to see the Eva Perry Library on the route, I also understand that if you're going to design a route that's going to circulate every 60 minutes, you can't be all things to all people. But I hope at some point in the future, when this becomes a big success and the ridership numbers are great and you can add more than one bus at a time, maybe we can and cover some of those other areas, including those that you touched on. But overall, well, and I just want to offer a little context for those in the audience or watching that don't know all the details. Your Wake County Commissioners are very dedicated to expanding transportation options in Wake County. As a result, the Board of Commissioners put together a planning task force a number of years ago to work on this issue. It included a lot of members all around the county, business community, electeds, all kinds of folks, and they drafted what is now known as the Wake Transit Plan, which anybody can Google that and read to their heart's content, particularly if you have insomnia. You can read this 200-page document. And it basically is an approach that we agreed on as a community to implement over the next 10 years. It's not the long-range forever plan, it's the pieces that we can do right now that we think will make a difference. That plan had 4 areas in it of what we call the big moves, and one of those is just connect us regionally, but also to connect all municipalities. And so this is part of that initiative that is in the plan. We went to the voters in the fall of 2016 with a referendum to approve a 1/4-cent sales tax increase to fund the transit expansion. So the programs that were talked about tonight, where you can get the 50% funding, and possibly the other one that was at the bottom, that's the source of those funds. This community came together, and we were very fortunate that by and large the voters agreed this was something we need to focus on. So you're not going this alone, West Moyer. We are here to help. This is what this is all about. The county is just trying to be a convener in this, if you will. We actually don't legally control any properties that are outside of the unincorporated areas. The municipalities do that, but we are trying to be, a good conduit to bring all the communities together around this important issue. And then, of course, now Go Triangle, Go Cary, Campo, and those organizations have official responsibility for seeing all this to fruition. But I just wanted to say how extremely important I think this is, and I encourage you to please move forward with this. The one thing that we do know from the expansions that have already taken place in bus service in Raleigh in the last 2 years, where we have increased the frequency of buses coming around, the ridership has increased. So I'm really glad to see that we're at least going to do proposing a 60-minute circulator as opposed to, perhaps just peak time or something, because evidence has shown that the more frequent you run, the more riders you will get. So I know we have to just start at a kind of a conservative place, but just keep that in mind. And I think that our regional fare structure that we've put into place is a big improvement, as was already mentioned, and having free ridership for senior citizens and youth is a great thing. And I especially want to highlight the youth program that's mentioned earlier. It's only been in place 1 year, already had great response from our teenagers. And why we think that is so important is so many of us in this room, particularly if you grew up in the South with suburban sprawl, you're not inclined to use mass transit. But if you start young using transit, you're more inclined to continue doing so as your life goes on. And of course, we want to do what we can to relieve traffic congestion, and I don't have to tell you what we're experiencing here in Apex and all over the county. So to the extent that we can get more people engaged in different modes of transportation, the better we will be. So I appreciate your time tonight. Just wanted to say the county is here. If you need to speak with us, but your staff is engaged with all the right folks. And I just appreciate Apex being willing to get going on this, and let's get moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Evans. All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing and refer the matter back to council. The request from staff is that we approve the map amendments.
I'll make that motion.
I'd second that.
All right, discussion on the motion to approve the map amendments.
The map looks good to me. I understand what you're saying about going down Olive Chapel, but it makes more sense to turn around and loop around at this time, I think. I would just like to make one quick comment, because I will have to echo Mr. Gantz's note that probably if they can work out free ridership for the first few years, I think that would may certainly help. And then if it's interfacing with another bus line, then at that point they can pay the fee, if that's the case. But at least we'd have free ridership. Looking at the costs, as you did, the income is so low in comparison to the fixed costs that it makes sense to try to build up that ridership, because that's what the whole idea is. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion?
Hey, I just want to say, I want to push the gas on transit, by the way. A couple things I forgot to mention, though, is goapex.org. That does not appear to be bought yet, so that might need to be fixed. Because I typed it in and then it was nonsense stuff. So somebody might be listening and buy it right now. Hopefully that won't happen. With the priorities, you mentioned a couple things. I forgot this part in the main thing. I think bus shelters, I would place a high priority on those to get people out of the rain. So there can be, frills about GPS and Wi-Fi, but if they're out there in the rain, they're not going to care about that as much. So I think Wake County is doing a good job in prioritizing that. I think that would be a good move as well.
All right. Any other discussion on the motion for approval? All right, not hearing any, I'll call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, no?
No.
All right, that passes 3-1. And that concludes that public hearing. Based on time, I'd like to give us a 5-minute recess, and then we'll reconvene shortly. This is the first recess. Why are you here? Because you told her no, man. It's just 2 hours is the target. It's your birthday today.
Second, there could be It certainly makes sense in larger cities all around us, New York, DC, obviously.
We got one more. Conrad. Oh, okay. Good answer. That's fine.
Well, everyone lives in Abington, there's apartments. They would have to be able to get to bigger creek. It always be on the way. I mean, right now.
Good to see you again. I can't get my laptop running. You're missing that. So you're missing the double slap. Yeah. Well, email to me. I saw you leave. Well, I don't know. I look at this map and I was thinking,
Fair thing's not gonna work if we're going for ride and slow, right?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask about too.
Well, the reason paratransit costs so high in the initial scenario is due to having vehicle station and Apex all day for usage as per paratransit station, just to create more efficiency with having not having to go back and carrying Apex all day long from carry trips and these type of trips. Because it's all going to be run out of the same operating base that we have, and it just takes more sense to have vehicles stay down here. Those vehicles are charged by the hour, so whether someone's riding it or not, it's still real costs.
But if it's per ride though, we're gonna have to rethink this fare thing. No, we're gonna have to go free. It's stop on the charge. Per ride.
That's where you lose ridership.
I know that's what I'm worried about, but fixed cost of repair of transit is free makes more sense. But if we switch, and that would be tough to switch, both things at the same time. I think so. I am just excited, and the things are great for right too. The Tribe J thing was in there last week. There was a I love this so much, but
I would say everyone's got to check out transit. It's not necessarily. Some people will see a bus drive by and it's empty, and they have an opinion about transit. It's not a good one. So it's always like, we're always out there trying to, that's all I can say. Advocating, telling people this makes sense.
Can you hear this? Yeah. That's great. Always
Not every two. You know what, it's a celebration you've lived another year. I mean, that's it, exactly. No matter what you're into.
In every case, so I appreciate it.
I guess.
At this point, my kids are
Nothing
still
goes in
not
transit.
another year, so I should
We're all-
forget. There you go. I agree. Teenagers. I
I know if it was up to me and I had a bus route that would take me to my job site, work, I would take the bus rather than drive. No doubt.
I live 3 miles away, and years ago, I looked at what it would take for me to ride here, and it was an hour and 45 minutes, and I had to go to Durham.
Yep.
I could not get from 3 miles.
It doesn't start early enough in the morning, but.
Our regional transit, regional service, that's gonna
could do email at home and wait till that time.
6:30 by the time we got here. Ride the bus. Go to lunch.
And typically, how do you guys manage the controlling of, like I saw you came down and you put up the little PowerPoint that has just the display that says welcome and whatnot. Typically, how do you manage that? I mean, do you normally come down and do that?
No.
Does somebody have?
It's usually Mike or whoever's.
Okay, and then
Mr. Gant?
Yep.
Ready?
Everybody's in the room.
All right, everybody's in the room? Come on, council members. All right, we're going to reconvene, call the meeting back into session, and we now move to public hearing number 5. This is our amendments or possible amendments to the UDO. Ms. Bunce, how are you?
I'm doing well. Okay, so all of the proposed UDO amendments before you tonight are proposed by planning staff. The first amendment is to the master subdivision final plat guidelines, which currently requires that a plat contain no fewer than 15 lots, unless the only exception being where there's fewer than 15 lots remaining. And we are proposing that there be additional exceptions, which include when lots are located within a non-residential subdivision, which often they're already less than 15 lots, but still may need to be phased and not include all of the lots in the subdivision. And finally, for situations where there may be a unique circumstance where it makes sense that the planning director, with the consent of the Public Works and Transportation Director and Water Resources Director, could approve less than 15 lots on a plat. Any questions on that amendment? Okay. Moving on. The next amendment is to the temporary uses and structures section to add language that currently exists later on in the use considered other temporary uses. And so this language is nearly identical to that. And it states that temporary uses and activities or special events shall not jeopardize the public health or safety or be injurious or detrimental to properties adjacent to or in the vicinity of the proposed location of the activity. We believe this should be a general guideline for all temporary uses. Any questions on that? Okay. The next amendment, I'll actually jump forward a slide, actually also involves the temporary use section, and we have use number 7 is temporary use permits issued under a special use permit. It's quite wordy. We have had one instance of this being used for a house that was to be used as a wedding venue. Their special use permit was approved for a 20-year period. It expires in 2033. This is problematic in that should another situation like this arise, there are provisions for assembly, for-profit or not-for-profit to be approved as a special use permit in the same zoning district that property is located in, as well as a lot of other locations throughout the town. So we feel like it should just follow the approvals through the special use permit process, minor site plan associated with that. And so with the repealing of this use, there are amendments needed to the special use section, which makes reference to that. And we also found that the special use section still reference planning board, which planning board does not hear quasi-judicial cases, and so we need to strike that wording as well. Any questions on that? Okay. The next amendment is to the parking and loading section, which in order to allow for gravel parking at landmark and other historic structures, capital area preservation, which helps us review our historic properties and often adaptive reuse of those properties, often want to see the parking be historically appropriate with the structure, and they do not want to see asphalt paving. And so we would be allowing for gravel or exposed aggregate concrete, which is a harder surface that looks like gravel. Any questions on that amendment? Okay. And finally, as promised last month,
We are proposing a minimum separation when there are two mini boards located on a drive-through lane, and we are proposing that that minimum separation at any point be 8 feet. Any questions on that?
Is there a current sign in violation of that right now?
There is not. We have not had an instance where menu boards were put adjacent to one another, and generally they are at least 8 feet by our best estimations.
So if they had been in violation, what would happen there? Would we have to change? Oh, they get grandfathered? Okay.
We could either grandfather them or they would just become non-conforming. There would be two options there, should there be a case. Planning Board heard this last night and unanimously recommended approval of all 5 amendments.
Thanks for the follow-through on that one.
I'm sorry?
Thank you for the follow-through on that one.
You're welcome.
I guess I should ask a question on number 4. So what happens if they have gravel and it's there's complaints from the neighbors about all the dust that's created from the gravel? Do we have like a...
So it does have to be gravel and kept in a dust-free condition. So it's the way that the gravel is maintained with adding more rock. As it breaks down and becomes dustier, you can put more rock. It can be sprayed with water. But there are ways for it to be kept in a dust-free condition.
Was your question, can it be reported? Because yes, it could be reported and followed up upon.
But can we do anything about it if we have this like this?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we could require the property owner to then go back and pave that because the whole purpose of it being gravel is to be in context with the historic significance of the property. And that's some users may find that that's why the exposed aggregate concrete is better, is less maintenance over time, or less frequent maintenance, I should say, than gravel. So that's why we've added that option in as well, and capital area preservation completely supports that as an option.
Okay, I'm guessing it's inappropriate to get rid of the gravel and require that, the exposed aggregate concrete.
I wouldn't recommend that, because there are plenty of examples where gravel is used, and it is quite historic because for years and years, the way people had a driveway that they didn't want rutted is they would bring in a big truck, drop a bunch of gravel in, spread it out flat, and then drive on it. Yeah. And then if it starts to get to where it's kind of mashed into the ground and there's some dust, you just put another small layer of gravel on top. And you can do that for infinity, as long as it takes, and no more dust.
Right.
It's that simple.
I grew up with both my grandparents having that situation on long driveways that were used by more than one family, and that's exactly how it's maintained. It's not a problem.
I actually did as well back in Asheville. But so the dust-free part, though, if there's complaints, we could say you're not doing it properly dust-free enough, and they would have to put in new gravel, I guess, at that point.
We would look at options to reduce the dust issue.
Okay.
Yes.
I had a question about 8.7.1A. Yeah, the menu boards.
Yes.
A, B, and C. I was just reading through those. Was that the easiest way that we could word that? It seems awfully wordy and confusing. Unless provided in C, and then C says unless referenced in B, and I don't know, it seems kind of circular.
It's not easy to write ordinances like this, and at the time, after pondering it for some time, that was the best way, so that it couldn't be misinterpreted or have, there's going to be redundancy in language no matter which way it was phrased. So it was either adding the option in C in both A and B, or adding except as provided in C below. Best I can recall from my drafting of that last month.
I contest the EPA regulations are way worse than that. Guaranteed.
Okay. At this time, I'll open the public hearing. See, no one has signed up for public hearing, so I'll close the public hearing and refer the matter to council for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for approval. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, that passes unanimously. And seeing that we've reached the end of our public hearings, We do have the one consent number 7 that was moved down to new business number 1. So at this time, I'll turn the floor over to the town manager so he can explain himself. So he can explain what his concern was to discuss it in new business.
And I'd be happy to turn to my left and punt.
Oh. Well played, town manager.
So we had a request for a right-of-way closing in the downtown. My understanding, though, was that there might be some questions from council about the closing of a right-of-way or what may or may not have been an alley at some point based on some of the recommendations for the downtown plan. It's better, so when that was mentioned to me, I recommended that it be pulled because it's better that we go ahead and pull this now and discuss this. Because if council wishes not to move forward with this, we need to just stop the process, because otherwise it's going to cost the town and the individual time and money, and we don't want to go through that process if it's not likely to be approved. So that's the only reason I would pull. This is just the call for the public hearing, which would be in 4 weeks, but that includes the posting by the clerk, the mailing of the letters by the clerk, the survey that the individual has to do, the work that Lori has to do in preparing everything. So we're just trying to avoid that if we don't think that we're going to close the right-of-way. That's all.
Oh, okay.
The right-of-way request is for, it's a 10-foot wide strip between Chatham and Olive. It's not in use other than we do have a sign on that, historical downtown sign. We would retain an easement for that if council wishes to move forward.
Between which streets, sorry?
Between Chatham and Olive.
No, yes, but which block?
Oh, jeez.
Mason and Hughes.
Thank you. Mason.
Oh, yes.
So, I think the question was, in the downtown plan, there's reference to redevelopment that includes alleyways for, whether it be back entrances, accessory dwelling units, that sort of thing. And if we wanted to potentially have that in the future, why, if we got the right of way, hold on to it. That was, I think, the comment that I heard. This alley in particular, it's 10 feet wide. It wouldn't meet any standard. You'd have to widen it to meet current town standards for public use. Public use. At most, you might get a one-way down there, and that doesn't really help so much when you're trying to have accessory units. Plus, if someone parks on it, you're not going to be able to get by. So it could be used, but it couldn't be used in its current 10-foot right of way. It'd have to be widened anyway. So that's just something for council to consider. So, the individual requesting it, they are looking just to expand their property only by 5 feet, but it would expand their property by 5 feet. And as they subdivide, it just gives them 5 more
Well, that
feet.
was the old Honey Wagon Trail.
Oh.
Before we had sewer downtown.
The map is from
Don't know
1880.
that, right?
The map is from 1885, Mayor. So I'm not going to, I don't know.
So you are probably
Were you there? So,
well, my grandfather lived there, and so I heard all the pre-sewer stories. Still got a outhouse downtown over there, not far away from there, still standing.
So for this, I think the ask in this is if council doesn't think this is going to be something that they're open to really considering to close the right of way, then we can start the process. I will say the owners would like to have this, but they don't need it to do what they want to do at the property. It's additional. They saw that that was opportunity to do it. So they would like to move forward, and if council is apt to hearing it and going through that, then it's the call for the public hearing, issuing the notice. I just didn't want to spend time and money on both sides.
So just open conversation, is anyone either amenable or in a situation where they say we don't want to pursue the closing of this right away?
So this is probably my fault because I brought this up this morning in my conversation with the town manager, and in the downtown plan, they talked about increasing the density in that area as a way for it to be affordable and walkable to downtown, and it anticipated roads back there. And I stayed in an Airbnb in Pittsburgh recently that had something like this, where it was one way. It was like 10 feet. It was very narrow, but people could have like a little driveway off it, and it didn't matter. It was one way because hardly any houses used it. It's like maybe 3 or 4, and so it worked, and it worked amazingly well, I thought. So to get more units and more livability in that area. And I'm guessing if we try to do alleyways, and let's say we get rid of all these right-of-ways, because this is on the map I've noticed several places. Like,
there are 3 in this general area.
I'm guessing it's going to be a lot harder to put in the alleyways afterwards. It's my understanding, because then it would require agreement from everybody.
That'd be correct. I mean, you basically be having to purchase. You'd have to go back and purchase the right-of-way.
So we could do theoretically one-way streets that are only 1 car wide.
Yeah, I don't want to
right
speak,
now.
Yeah, without Russell here, I don't want to speak to what the standards may be on for that. I mean, but there's always options to create and do whatever council decides you want to do moving forward. So,
Well, at the very least, it'd be easier to make it up to standard because you'd only be taking like 2 or 3, or I'm not sure how much feet on each side. The vision I saw of the downtown plan makes me not want to vote for this because it looked like a great way to increase density in that important area. That's where I'm coming from.
What is currently on this right of way? Do we have anything? You mentioned a sign.
so we have a sign. We have the historical signs, the round signs with the arrow frame, and it's it's actually you'd be on the right of way with the it's closer to the road. Right now, it's grown up. Now there are some property owners that have extended their fence line onto the right of way. But it's not a alleyway. It's not a used alleyway or a used right of way. So it's on the map. It's on the paper. It may have been. It was used for other things at some point in time. But right now, it's most of those property owners probably think that it's part of their property. So.
They've been not used for right-of-way for decades.
Yeah, that would, based on where the growth and where things are, that's probably likely.
I do know that there have been also some just like it that were closed in the past.
That's good.
There have.
So basically, your objection to it is that an alleyway couldn't be put in post-development if we closed it.
I don't know if the answer is wouldn't be. I think it'd be. I don't know how it would go, but I think it'd be more difficult to get approval from everybody if in the future they want to put these ADUs in the back and they want to have a little driveway off it, so that they don't have to share a driveway in a parking spot there. I think it'd be I think it'd be a lot easier to do it that way with an alley back there without having to get agreement from everybody. Because theoretically, right now, if you get rid of it, and someone in the middle of that thing wants to put a ADU in the back, how are they going to do it? And there's no way they can do it. No way they'll be able to do it without using the driveway.
That would be correct. They would have no access.
Right.
I mean, they'd have to come through their yard, their normal.
Yeah. Right. So I think, it's not at all about the past. It's about the future. I think is why I'm worried about this. And if we do this, any other blocks in downtown.
So that's kind of a good point, but this is one lot though, right? So I mean, if somebody came in and wanted to redevelop it and put ADUs or different units back in the back, it would be part of their overall plan of how they get to the driveway to get back to those units, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, any lots by there, the whole right-of-way is what would give access. And if you close it, actually in this case, the owners are actually requesting a partial closing, just the part that's touching their lot, so it wouldn't even be the full thing. Yeah, that would go away. So anything in the middle,
they would just build their own driveway to whatever.
Potentially, yeah. I mean,
right.
But it would go through the front. It wouldn't be a rear access.
I guess I'm inclined not to move ahead. I think it just takes away our options in the future. Whether it's used for an alleyway or another line of buffer, I don't know. But I don't know whether you can do that, being as it's a right of way for access. But I agree with you. I think it's best to keep it as it is. Keep our options open for future council. My thought.
And landowners, I guess, too.
And landowners, too.
Any other thoughts?
think there's any harm in leaving it the way it is. It gives more options in the future.
From my personal experience, part of the reason I know so much about this is because the one that was behind my grandparents off of South Mason Street was closed at a time where the family wasn't able to pay attention to what was going on. And the family has never, in general, never found that a good taste in their mouths. It was, even though it hadn't been used, and I'd heard all the stories about how it was used in the past. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to turn my back on you, but it was one of those things where it's very little benefit for what you give up. And should the town ever need anything, even if all you do is create a non four-wheel vehicle access, but somehow so people can still use it legally, and especially with the advent of accessory dwelling units as a development type that we didn't have even when the right-of-way was closed 20 some years ago, it seems like. We're now, as a family, because the property's still in the family, talking about how to put an ADU in the back of that property, because they're, as you can see, some of them are 1:3 ratio rectangles. So there's plenty of room in the back, but there's not much room to get a car past the house. And it's one of those things where even nowadays, looking at that lot, and my family's asking me, you know, how can we do it? Can we put one back there? And I think it's possible, but it would be a whole lot easier if there was even if it's a one-way, narrow, and the town made some kind of special exception as to what would be a legitimate town alleyway or something of the right-of-way to get access to it. That would solve a lot of backyard ADU problems. So, yeah, I don't see myself, even though I'm not a voter, unless there's a tie to break, I don't see myself liking the idea, and I don't see that there's a lot of benefit to anybody in closing it. It'd be different if all of that strip of land was, you know, a parcel that was roughly rectangular somewhere, but with a narrow right-of-way, it doesn't really provide a lot of benefit, but one day we could look back and go, oh, glad we got that there. So
it's basically preventing landlocked use of that.
And it may be 50 years before we have a real legitimate use for it, and I'm okay with that.
Can we call for a motion?
I think, so the question, I think the consent agenda item was to set the public hearing.
Well, it was a motion to approve the resolution of intent. So
Right, so do we need a resolution to reject it or just do nothing?
Do nothing.
Okay, so absence of activity. So,
Makes it easy.
yeah, does anybody feel compelled to make a motion of approval? Okay, then we'll just let it slide. I'm okay with that. We'll just let it go.
I'll notify the request, and I've already spoken with her today. And
Okay.
So she's aware.
Okay, thanks. All right, well, that one is complete. And now, having completed all of our open session business, we have a couple of closed session items. One is to consult the attorney for protecting attorney-client privilege, and the other is discussing town's negotiation position for acquisition of real property. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor of going to closed session for those purposes, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. All right, we are now going to closed session, and we have no other open session items. Thank you to those of you who stuck around to the end. We always wonder what you stayed for.
Laughs, I think, right?
It is. Alone, thank you.
Okay.
Good point.
Yeah, YouTube first now, right?
Shannon, is there another copy of this laying around in here? I don't mean to go, you have to go hunt one down. but- Okay. I know somebody, a senior who would want the information, want the map. So I wanted to take an extra one and keep mine. Thanks. Oh, thanks, whoever got that, Laurie or Sean. I don't know whose I got. Okay, thanks. Shannon can print you another one. Or Jenna, maybe, if it's Jenna.
I've got the reports.
Thank you, Sean. All right.
I'm not sure you're the one with
Yep, thanks. Are you, what's up? Conrad. Very nice to meet you. Welcome aboard. Yeah. You first base?
Yeah, get used to things.
Only been here. Oh, very good.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Getting there.
Where are you from?
Originally from the Midwest. So I moved out to Raleigh about a year ago.
Yeah.
Go to Chapel Hill.
Okay.
That kind of stuff. Down in Chicago to get a little closer to Chapel Hill. Awesome. Right in between. Yeah, that's just kind of been the story. I just wanted to get out of the Midwest.
Yeah.
I have a friend who lives in Charlotte, so I like to
Right.
decided to go to Raleigh just because there's a bit more opportunity there.
Yeah.
But
Very good. Thanks. Welcome aboard, Conrad.
thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Test.
ass kicking boots off.
I'll do.
Gonna do it again.
Yeah.
It's because you're so popular.
It's my reminder.
It gets worse. Okay, let's do it.
Government employee. It's like, even if you want to stay late, you would like, don't do it, man. Make this.
Go ahead, man.
Oh,
All right,
okay,
so-
I'll make a motion.
So we're back in an open session. We're looking for a motion in order to, can you word it for us?
Motion to approve a resolution authorizing eminent domain related to Laura Duncan Road multi-use path project.
Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. All right, that is approved
I got it
4-0
right.
unanimously. And we have conducted all of our business tonight, so we are adjourned. Thank you.
What's left of it? Cost her like $700 in fees plus.
Okay, to get the,
Just to get all the filings on and the notices and all that stuff.
okay, so that person who requested it's not happening. That one, this one.
Yeah.
Good.
And she wanted to be for survey.
Good, okay, good. Well, yeah.